Hello, everybody. It has been 2 weeks, and you know what that means. It is time for yet another patch notes review, and this time it is going to be for patch 0.80. We are finally hitting another one of those zero patches here. Again, a clean number for this one. And as you guys can see, looking at the banner, this is going to be the patch where Vanya is released. Although I will say this is a relatively simple patch, so it might be a bit of a quicker video than usual, but of course, as usual, let's just dive straight into this video as well. First of all, let's start with the patch change thought process and direction like we always do. There's a ton of words, but I will try to make it as simple as possible. The first one is just talking about how they're going to change up how the balancing is going to work. We've seen this pretty much throughout the course of Season 8. We've been seeing a lot more stats, as you guys can see in this link over here, which just basically takes you over to a table where there's going to be a lot of stats that you can look at throughout the course of the previous patch. And they're just talking about how a couple of additional stats are going to be added or factored in into how changes are going to be made. And as you can see, one big other point here is the fact that 0.80 is, as a matter of fact, our big final major patch before the end of the season, as we do only have about 2 weeks left in it. And that means some of our bigger character changes are going to be happening after, most likely during the preseason or when the actual Season 9 begins. Another thing that I do want to talk about here is the fact that there's been a lot of mechanical changes or even game changes throughout the past couple of years. We've been having Eternal Return, and sometimes those changes do work out in favor, sometimes they don't. And we can see here that a lot of changes that they've thought, they've been trying to do, they've been trying to make it as less toxic as possible as we get these progressive changes. And the one example that they do put out here is that they've been addressing the Hyperloop interruption little by little. So testing out a couple of things, not implementing something major of a change until they have additional information in the background. And we're going to go forth with a bit of a change up here in regards to how that works. We've experimented with a couple of things from before, and it seems like we'll be talking about this in just a second when we start talking about the mechanical changes. But we are going to have Hyperloops uninterruptible like we did before, so after some experimenting, it seems like Nimble Neuron is going to decide with this specific change for the Hyperloops. Next up, of course, it is Season 8 again. More battle zone changes going to be coming through here, but this is a lot of talk about the internal workings of the battle zone and how they can't exactly make it function as something similar to the Cobalt team zones, because then it all has to deal with some specific things about the internal workings of the Cobalt team-specific zones, more so than what they want for the battle zone. That's pretty much all of the word that is being used here, and how they've been experimenting with multiple different ways to try to implement battle zones. But a lot of the answers that they've come up with also has a lot of back-offs, a lot of drop-offs, a lot of cons that come with it as well, which is the reason why we haven't seen too many major implications or major changes with how the battle zones itself work. Now, there is one part of this that says they want to try treating battle zones separately from Lumi Island, but of course that's going to take a very, very long time to implement. So, over the course of time, maybe we'll start seeing a little bit more implementations, I should say, of the battle zones. So don't think that battle zone changes are going to drop off just because the end of the season is here for Season 8. We're going to see more of those during Season 9, and even maybe more when the game officially releases as well. Other than that, the only other thing about this patch note that they want to really mention is the fact that we have two new items, although they're kind of in line with one another. One is going to be Cowboy Hat, which is going to be an epic tier attack speed head equipment, as well as Star of the Wilds, which is just basically a direct transition from that. Okay, well, let's move on directly over onto the mechanical changes as well. As I just talked about in our previous section, we are going to be unstoppable during the Hyperloop. So this was something that was implemented, I think it was either later on into Season 7 or earlier on into Season 8, where you were just straight up interruptible during hyperloops. Now they changed this from before because it was straight up kind of difficult for people who usually used to just constantly interrupt hyperloops, like as you can see on this GIF, to try to deny people and slow them down. But then they changed it so that only the first instance of crowd control will make you not be able to use a hyperloop in the first day or so of the game. They're going to revert that change and go back to straight up unstoppable while using the hyperloop. And that means if you are on the hyperloop, you should be completely fine in regards to making sure you can get out of there, even if other people are using their mobility skills, like Hyunwoo first attack, to get closer to the hyperloop. Other things, more changes over onto the battle zone. Nerf stabilizer drop range is going to be decreased. Max range is going to be increased as well. So basically just making it sure that it's a little bit more consistent as you try to pick up those nerf stabilizers, as it is very important at this point to pick those up as well. The shuttle system overload damage is going to be even increased more higher, so you should be able to kill that a lot faster than before as well. Just a quick change here for the augments. Havoc is going to be seeing a bit of a nerf here, which kind of makes sense because we saw in 0.79 a lot of augments were changed to be able to proc a lot more frequently so that more combat can happen continuously. Frailty had a lot of really good stats going forward, and I believe it also got buffed in the last patch. So we're going to actually see a bit of a nerf here, which is actually pretty heavy. The damage portion of Frailty is going to get nerfed by the scaling of about half, because now you're only going to get half of the damage that you get normally compared to before. And defense reduction will also see a little bit of a nerf here as well. So I wouldn't say Frailty is completely dead for the most part, but definitely a nerf where it needs to happen. And as I talked about earlier in our intro, I should say, we do have Vanya releasing thanks to 0.80, and this character, honestly, in my opinion, I've been looking at a lot of content in regards to the trailer for it. There's been a lot of talk about this character recently as well, not just from the North American community, but even for the Korean community as well. Her kit looks absolutely beautiful, by the way. And I mean beautiful specifically in the stylistic parts. I haven't really been able to kind of grasp how this character is going to function as a whole in the game itself. I'll have to figure that out once she actually releases. And of course, I'll include, as I always do, the Lumiapedia video that, again, my friend Circadia recorded about Vanya as well. But this character definitely has a lot of potential to kind of shake things up, especially in the matchup with the characters that are very, very good right now, that are much more oriented towards kind of brute forcing a lot of these fights and try to lock things down while they try to get the damage out. Vanya is a really good character, in my opinion, that tries to stop that and interrupt that as much as possible. So I think in the current meta, Vanya will be really good. Again, as I always say as well, it's never going to be a guaranteed thing. Of course, take all my word. Just second guess what I say, or don't take my words into context here. But I think this character is going to be really, really interesting when she releases. We'll have to see tonight tonight if you're watching the video as soon as it's released, when 0.80 comes out, what kind of builds are going to be implemented into this character, how people are going to be able to operate this character as well. But for the most part, she looks absolutely amazing in the game itself. Hopefully, she's also great as well. Next up, let's start talking about some of our characters. Of course, new patch means new characters get lower cost this time around. It is going to be Aiden, Camillo, as well as Adela. For the most part, though, we were talking about this earlier, not too many character changes are going to be coming through, at least major character changes. We do have a couple that I will be mentioning here, but a lot of the additional changes that aren't really going to be happening that you normally see are going to be towards the items. So for the most part, these changes to the characters as well as the items, they should not be too long today, but let's get started here. First, a simple buff over onto Daniel, as well as Rozzy. Just a couple of small damage buffs in order to help them due to their lower stats. And for Martina, she has still been struggling quite a bit to reach that endgame mark because she has been, again, increased in regards to the amount of stacks that she actually needed. So we'll be able to give them a little bit of a bonus here as she's going to be able to survive a little bit earlier on in the game. Base movement speed is going to be increased, and for record, we're going to see a little bit of a damage fall off towards the earlier stages of the game, but more towards the late game. As you can read here, though, this is much more of an adjustment for Cobalt Protocol because you're never really going to hit that broadcast mark at level 1 of the ultimate, so much more of a change based towards Cobalt. Bianca here will also be getting another buff here. We've only been seeing her really getting a lot of buffs. Her stats still aren't the greatest because her damage is very much front oriented. You need to get that combo in, so she's going to be buffed a little bit again here to make sure that she can actually make up for the amount of damage that she is lacking right now to actually kill people. Celine is also going to be feeling a little bit of a hit here, but her stats have been absolutely ballistic. For how difficult of a character she is, her pick rate has been absurd. Her win rate, considering her pick rate, is also pretty good as well, so she'll be seeing a bit of a hit here. Shukai getting a buff yet here again too. More consistency by lower cooldowns on two of his important skills, Heavy Meal and Walk It Off. Cecilia will be seeing a bit of a buff here, slash a nerf. I think it's mostly a nerf because, you're mostly building amplification scaling on Cecilia. Her skill amplification scaling will be cut by about 15%, but her base damage is going to go up a little bit. I don't think the base damage increase is really going to make up for the amplification loss, though. Sylvia will be seeing a little bit of a buff here. As you can see, she is underperforming just from the text alone. Should be the same thing in the statistics if you go off of that too. So they're going to be lowering her cooldowns a little bit just for a bit more consistency. And a bit of a buff over onto the wheelie as well. Adela will be seeing a bit of a buff over onto Bat Mastery. Still a weapon that people don't exactly go for when you're playing Adela, but she has been seeing a little bit of play here and there. So quite interesting to see what this change is also going to do for Adela on Bat. Adina will be seeing a little bit of a buff here to base defense. Isaac going to be seeing a bit of a nerf here to attack power. And Alex going to be seeing another round of buffs as he's going to get more damage on his Q in both melee as well as range form. Now, Yan has been an interesting character here. Now, I didn't really realize that this was the way that Yan's second Q worked for Knee Strike, but as you can see here, there's been a little bit of kind of funky ways that it actually interacted, so I'm just kind of looking through the thing here again, since I'm still a little bit confused. I've never really played Yan before, but it's a bit more of a consistency in regards to how Yan will actually hit his second Q, and it seems like there was an interaction with how, even if you were inside of the indicator of the damaging thing, you actually didn't get hit by it sometimes. For example, on the other side of the wall right here, something like this. Apparently you didn't take damage beforehand. So I'm not entirely sure how that worked, but I'm just going to call it a Yan adjustment here to probably make it a little bit more make sensible for how his hitbox itself works. I guess it's a good thing for Yan. I can't tell. It's probably a good thing. Next up is going to be a bit of a buff over onto William, more cooldown buffs over onto characters for more consistency throughout fights. And we will also see yet another round of nerfs over onto Estelle, this time around hitting her very, very hard as the first part of suppression, her Q auto attack, is going to get way less attack range compared to before, and her second part will also see just a slight drop off on the range that you can auto that with, and Helitack stat, the shield will also decrease for the duration when she uses it on herself. So very hurt, I would say, for Estelle, although this character has still been pretty alright, I would say, in solos. Emma will be getting a bit of a buff here, at least when it comes to her change, but her basic attack amplification for Shuriken decreasing here, mostly on the side of if you're deciding to play crit Emma, which isn't something that people tend to play as a meta style thing, although we did see that in ERM pretty recently for a tournament thing. Should be a bit more focused on making sure that Emma's main auto attacks are being procced usably for her passive autos, more so than a crit utilization side. Cool things there. 11's going to see a bit of a nerf in the later stages of the game for herself. Jenny will be seeing a bit more consistency as we do get more defense per level as well as acceptance speech cooldown buff. Chloe will be seeing a bit of a buff. Kiara, much more damage when you are running the amplification. Theodore is going to see a bit more consistency with the energy cannon. Priya, again, more consistency, more continuous fight cycles with Echoes of the Earth getting a lower cooldown. And Fiora, going to be seeing a bit of a buff here on the spear amplification builds. Now, Piolo is another character that I do want to talk about quickly for a second here. This character has been quite interesting. I think Piolo, for the most part, in solos is very difficult to manage right now because for a game like Eternal Return in Season 8 that's a lot more team modes focused nowadays, in my opinion, I think Piolo very much succeeds over in that specific mode because you have another person that is also dealing damage while you're kind of interrupting everything that people want to do up in the front lines. Now, I will say he still does a lot more damage, which is kind of problematic than I thought, especially in duos. There's been some very, very high tier Korean team players for Piolo that has been absolutely running amok in these tournaments. So these changes are going to be a bit more of a controlled version of Piolo, making sure that his amplification scaling is not the greatest compared to before, but compensating for it by making up a little bit more damage scaling on his individual skills. They'll be happening for both Stall Throw / Skyward Pommel on his E, as well as the Punisher on his ultimate. Now, Haze is going to be our last character that we're going to see changed in 0.80. Now, 0.79 hurt her very much. I think I talked about it in the previous patch note. I think I highlighted it as well. Her ultimate does not knock enemies back anymore, which is really problematic for Haze, which, makes sense because she's a ranged character. It's very difficult to push away other melee characters as long as they have more utility after you use your shotgun on them. So they're going to give her a little bit more to work off of, more movement speed duration, especially with her weapon case. She gets a little bit more movement speed when you start swapping out of weapons. That's going to last a little bit longer. And she's also going to have a bit more damage to make up for all of that as well. So cool things happening to Haze. Hopefully this kind of brings her back. I've actually, unfortunately, lost a couple of my favorite Haze players because of the recent changes, and maybe this change is the one that kind of brings them back. But other than that, that should be all the character changes here for 0.80. Of course, I'm not exactly going to be talking about the team mode percentage changes because those are a little bit kind of minute, and you'll figure them out as we kind of go on. But other than that, that's it for 0.80 when it comes to the characters. Now, as I talked about before, the item changes are not going to be that many, so let's go through these pretty quickly. One main thing here though, Temporal Refraction is going to see a bit of a nerf over onto the cooldown. It's going to come up a lot slower, but it's only going to be applicable to Holy Orders as well as Laser Designator. For the weapons, pretty simple changes, nothing too crazy, just simple buffs and nerfs when it comes to the numbers. There's nothing too crazy there. And because of that, let's just go straight into the armor. Usually I kind of separate it into another tab, but this time it's alright, it was pretty quick. For the armors, for the most part in chest pieces, just some simple buffs across the board to all of our chest pieces. And for heads, we're going to see a little bit of a change here in regards to nerfs to tactical ops, and for Mohawk headgear, we'll see a bit of a nerf over onto the activation part of Reflection. But these are the two main items that I do want to talk about, Cowboy Hat as well as Star of the Wilds. Now, if you take a look at the stats here, it's going to be attack power, defense, as well as attack speed. Now, you take a look at this and you think of headpieces. There hasn't been too many headpieces that gives you attack speed. The only ones that really kind of pop off to you is going to be the Tactical Ops helmet, as well as the Mithril helmet, but those two don't really give you the offensive stats that you would normally think for when you want the attack speed coming out of it. You mostly get the cooldown, you get the health, you get the defense, and, I mean, way before you got Vigor off of it, but that's gone now. This time around, you're going to see an item that comes out that makes a little bit more sense in regards to what the stats are going to give you. Attack power, defense, and attack speed. So if you're looking for the bonus attack speed that comes out of a headpiece, and you also want a little bit more attack power to go along with it, Cowboy Hat is going to be your item to go, and directly transitioning from that is going to be the Star of the Wilds with the Meteorite, as you get a bit more stats, 3 attack power, 2 defense, as well as a whole 10% attack speed coming out of that headpiece as well. For the arms, we'll see some simple changes across the board. Again, Reflection for Sword Stopper going to be nerfed here. Centipede's Pauldron, same thing for the Reflection. Although, pretty big buff over onto Tyndalos Monarch, a whole 3% cooldown reduction buff over onto that item. So if you do have another cooldown reduction item, maybe other than Burgundy, you should be able to simply hit that 35% mark a lot easier compared to before. Raider is going to see a bit of a buff, and Shielded Kings, just 1 attack power buff onto that item as well. And one more additional change that I actually wanted to kind of mark here for the items. Red Shoes is going to be made very simple now, just off of the slippers instead of the high heels, so removing the scrap metal from the equation. And now it's also going to have a whole 25% attack speed, while its attack power is reduced by 3. Now, Red Shoes has been an item that's kind of been in a little bit of a limbo. It's pretty okay. don't get me wrong, but you have a lot of other really good items that you can build off of Blood Sample now that Blood Sample has become very much more, I think, versatile in regards to who can actually use it. And Red Shoes is one of those that people typically tend to not go for since you already have shoes built up, most likely, stuff like the Alexander, stuff like the Glacials. They have been so good in the early stages because you get that additional movement speed, much more mobility around the map. So they're going to change it a little bit here. Red Shoes, a buff, I would have to say. The additional attack speed making sense for a lot of characters that do want the Omni Siphon as well as the additional attack power that you do get out of it. Cool things for Red Shoes. Buff over onto the bladed boots as well as the Iron Maidens, and for the accessories, just mostly changes that are important going over towards the mythic items that we do see here. Buffs across the board for those. And with a new patch, that means we get new content, of course, for Season 8. Our final 2 skins of Season 8 going to be coming through here. Street Fiend William, as well as Trapped Leon. 2 very cool skins, I will say. I've been loving the splash art for Trapped Leon, and you guys can see on the thumbnail, we do have her on one of our 2. And I will say, cool skins. Nothing I have against at all. I do, of course, get them because I bought the season pack. But individually, I think these 2 are also very worth skins. I think the William skin has been hyped up quite a lot because of how significant the skin is when it comes to William. It's been a while since he's gotten one. And for the Leon skin, of course, because it's her first skin after her release. Overall, though, that's going to be it for patch 0.80. A very simple patch, I will say, compared to a lot of the previous patches we've talked about, because it is the last patch before the season ends. So we didn't really see that many item changes, especially when it came to the weapons. We just saw some pretty simple number changes for those. And even for the characters, a couple of the characters that I talked about were a little bit of a stretch because it was much more descriptive and I had a bit more of a backstory to them, but I didn't have to talk about a solid number of those characters at all. So when it comes down to it, 0.80, very, very simple of a patch. Again, it makes sense because of it. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how Season 8 went as a whole. I think this patch, this season in and of itself, has been one of the best seasons, at least for me, when it came to what I specifically do for the community, which is casting tournaments. It has been a lot more involvement in regards to how, both the commentators as well as the players have to actually physically interact with the game, and the transition that Nimbunran has done from making the main game mode of Eternal Return a lot more team modes oriented, more so than the solos, which is something that they have mentioned a very, very long time ago, seems to have come through, especially with the content they released in Season 8. So I love the state that the game is in so far. This is not just me kind of talking because, I have to talk about good things about this game. I have physically enjoyed what I did throughout the course of the season here. A very enjoyable season for the players, for the content creators, for the casters, I guess, since that's what I am, as well as the viewers, I would say, for the most part. Not too many complaints, although I did see some here and there. Nothing too serious to completely kill the game or anything. So amazing things that Nimble Neuron has done throughout the course of Season 8. Of course, with Season 9 in the horizon, we shouldn't see too many things changing there either, because Season 9 is going to be a lot more on the focus of making sure that the game is ready for the official release. And we'll be getting some small new content here and there with some additional skins coming out, so be excited for that. Other than that, I think my overall patch rating for this one is going to be an 8 out of 10. I didn't see anything too problematic with it. If anything, maybe even like a 9 out of 10 now that I think about it as well, just kind of going over it in my head. But of course, what I say doesn't matter. What really matters is what you guys think. What did you guys think about this patch, or even Season 8 as a whole? There was a couple more weeks left, but we had a really nice season, in my personal opinion. But what did you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. And that is going to be it from me. So thank you very much for watching this video. I will see you guys in the next one, probably the preseason patch, most likely. But have yourselves a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.